to Prepare Like a Pro live chats. My name's Jack McLean. I created Prepare Like a Pro early in the year. We are a strength and conditioning business based in Melbourne, but we're also working with athletes all around the country. We specialise in athlete development for football, and if you're interested in working with us, head over to our website, preparelikeapro.com, where you can see more information about me as well as the other coaches at Prepare Like a Pro. We have free training programs you can download, and our services are listed on the website. Super excited tonight to catch up with Ian McKeown. For those that don't know Ian, also known as Makkers, he is the head of performance of the Port Adelaide Football Club. Ian's further enjoys his work in athlete development through collaboration with research groups and consulting with a multitude of sports, most notably in tennis and football. He completed his Ph.D. thesis in 2013 at the Australian Institute of Sport, titled Power Development and Movement Ability in Junior Athletes. Whilst completing his thesis, Ian worked with Matilda's football team as national coordinator of the physical performance. He also spent 3 years coaching at the ACT Academy of Sport, leading the strength and conditioning programs for hockey and women's football. Prior to moving to Australia, Ian worked as a strength and conditioning coach at the Sports Institute of Northern Ireland for 5 years. So really looking forward to this chat. Bear with me. I'm just going to invite Makkers on to join us live.
Beautiful, mate. How are you?
Going well, mate. Yourself?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for jumping on.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really good. Really excited about this chat, mate. I'm looking forward to where it goes. Could go many ways. You've got plenty of experience.
I'm looking forward to listening to Watsy afterwards.
Yeah, well, you can set him up, mate. We'll get cracking straight into it. Take us back to the beginning. What age, how old were you when you fell in love with fitness or working with elite athletes?
Coaching, I've always been coaching, whether it was coaching younger kids whenever you were at school, so coaching the years below you, and then sort of going into a sports science degree. I was really lucky in that the first year or the first 2 years of the degree, you ended up with a heap of coaching badges. So I ended up spending my summers coaching tennis, hockey, rugby, cricket, and like football, soccer, on multiple different levels, male and female, starting from like 4-year-olds right through to big kids as well. But in terms of the elite stuff, it probably came a little bit later after I sort of pieced it all together in terms of, like, I knew I was always going to coach as such, like whether that was just coaching hockey or coaching whatever. But then now taking that sort of that professional step into the sort of the more performance side of things probably came as everything sort of started to click together with, sort of, I guess, understanding a bit more of the theory behind the human body and all the rest of it. And sort of as I sort of didn't really do that at school as such, it was more after when I got into uni when it really sort of clicked for me. And then it sort of all went from there.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you mentioned was it high school days where you coach kids in younger years than you in terms of how to run, or what?
It was all relative, but I was a pretty good hockey player back then. So all the sort of underage international stuff and that sort of things, and whether it was a club, so you played first 11 or senior hockey pretty early. So you might maybe coach you might have been a first 11 player coaching the under 13s or something like that. So it's kind of just a bit of it. You give back. That was pretty early. That was sort of just what people did. That wasn't anything that I particularly went after. It just sort of happened. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so as part of the culture growing up in Ireland, was it? Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's sharing or social. It wasn't particularly high level or anything, but it was just sort of making sure that even umpired, or it's just the way the clubs work. It's the same everywhere.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. Do you think that shaped the culture that you try and now, or that you've formed in elite sports, whether it be with Matilda's, Port Adelaide, in terms of everyone helping out and contributing and passing forward?
Yeah, like it's obviously various degrees with different resources and that sort of side of things. So probably I guess what I really appreciate now is that I did have a really like a long and probably arduous internship or junior coaching career where I had to learn how to do things on the fly with very little equipment, with very little motivated athletes, that type of thing. And that sort of really formed, I sort of feel like I'm very lucky to have done that now, particularly when you see like whether it's with the advent of more sports science degrees and more internships and a more sort of accessibility to elite level prep and the sort of the elite club stuff, which is we're incredibly lucky to be able to do. But I think that by being exposed to that, you sort of see where some people maybe haven't been given the chance to develop those skills, and then all of a sudden they expect that there's always 4 trainers at training, that there's always some, but the pitch is always magically free for them, that And it's hockey, the pitch is always watered for them. It's always ready to go. There's always cones and balls ready to go. Like, that's certainly not the case. And it's that, I think it's that, whether it's the sweeping the shed stuff or it's humility or who knows, but it sort of all adds up. And I would say that, like, I don't think it's any one particular thing that of my journey that's made me who I am today or anything like that. I think that it's all of it all together. That's probably what I've tried to take from it over time, which has made me sort of realize the importance of the environment and sort of creating good characters and good, and a nice environment to be able to work within.
Yeah, absolutely. And what made you choose to go down the path of sports science if your first experiences was like the tactical side, coaching these junior teams?
Yeah, a bit like most sort of Northern Irish or UK or wherever you are in the world, like when you're an 18-year-old, probably if you're half decent at sport, probably the ultimate's being a PE teacher.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly was back in the 90s, the late 90s, whenever I was around. So that just says how long I've been around now, but it's probably the only thing that kept you in sport.
Right.
Really, like, rugby union wasn't professional. I don't know about AFL. I mean, where AFL was at back in the day, like, for us, there wasn't professional sport really, apart from Premier League soccer, and that was incredibly hard to get into. So, that wasn't really an avenue for us back then.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, fantastic. And did you have strong mentors or people that influenced your career while you were shaping it in early days, or is it something that you're sort of self-taught in a sense of reading books and put yourself into workshops and experience? Have you had mentors along the way, or is it more something that you've done through personal development?
Yeah, I would like to think that I'm really self-driven, and there's a lot that I've picked up by putting myself in really uncomfortable situations, whether that's with learning environments and going into rooms where I have absolutely no clue of what these other people are talking about, and trying to pick up things and learn that way. But that would be unfair for the people that have helped me along my journey as well. I have to really, there's a lot of people that have helped me along the way. And probably it's good timing whenever I was coming through sort of sports science, and like the University of Ulster, which where I was sort of did my degree, it was very tied with Ulster rugby at the time, which is the only thing that's worth doing if you're an Ulsterman.
Yeah.
So like just happened to know the people that went into those roles, and they all came from quite a lot of people that have come through there that are really successful S&C coaches now. And I think that's probably one of the important things that I did pick up along the way. The Sports Institute was just starting out, so I was never going to be good enough to be an athlete in an institute setup, but I was kind of close enough that they kind of let me do it and just sort of hang out and just sort of be part of it. And I was really conscious to not get in the way and let the people who get the boys and girls who are actually really good get the time with the coaches. But it sort of let me, I guess, be it's probably like an internship. It was a very practical internship in that I was able to train and be part of it as much as anybody, and probably take it from an athlete's point of view. So it was really a nice hybrid way of doing it, which was, looking back on it, I was incredibly lucky to do, because it's just something that it's just impossible to offer young starting out S&C coaches or any coaches, or any professionals. You just can't do it to them, can't give them that opportunity anymore.
Yeah. So seeing it is really important.
I'd say feeling it is probably the biggest thing. I've had sort of several discussions this week around, like, it's not just about writing the program, because a program's program to me, but it's actually feeling it and imagining it and living it in your head, and then it's a visceral response to like writing a program. And if you don't have that, I just don't think you can be as good a coach or as vibrant a coach, or as you just don't get the same connection or the same belief out of your players or your athletes if you just don't have that. Good to be excited about something like that's for me. That's the easy thing to be excited about, and to be able to deliver that is such a privilege, and it's a way that I dare anyone to be better at me than me at that.
Yeah, fantastic. So for S&Cs that are watching, so how can they apply that? You write a sprint program and then goes for 6 weeks, go and do it, basically, that type of approach?
It's probably more like, don't just write it. It's probably don't bother, like, don't write it, start it. Like, don't spend the time worrying about 6 weeks of it. Go and see explore what it's like. What are the progressions like? What is it? Where do you need to start with this stuff? It's going to change every time. Don't just assume that this is once you've got a template in place, that's it. Sometimes that's absolutely true, and I'm not begrudging that, but just go through the thought process and just understand where everything's at, and then from that, I think that you'll create such a unique and it's such a more interesting program for you to coach, but then also for someone to have to be a part of. Because if anything, you're doing something which is special to them, it's unique to them without it being terribly onerous on anybody.
Yeah, for sure. I know personally the last couple of years it is a struggle to find that extra time not extra time, but prioritise your own training. So I guess this is probably selfish for me, but someone that's been in the game for longer, how do you find the time to have your own time to do your training? I know you're a parent as well, and obviously you're still involved with elite sport. You've done your Ph.D, so you get a lot done. How do you structure time throughout your day and you work that out the night before with your partner? Like, take us through sort of how you get your own training out.
Oh, I'm terrible at it. To be honest, it's one of the things which I'm the little Irish bloke that screams in the corner. It's kind of like, rather than the Adonis that never misses a session, I think that I spend so much time, and it's right or wrong, I don't care. Like, they're wired differently, but I just feel that I give so much into the sessions mentally and physically when I'm coaching them, and that's my priority. To be honest, I couldn't give a shit if I've got that session in that day at that time. Like, I'll care about it later, and I'll get down on myself if I continually miss sessions and I'm not consistent with my training. But to be honest, it's absolutely not my priority. My priority is to make sure that my athletes get the best of me, not that they get the second half of me after I've done my session, and that's in priority. Fuck that. No, it's not. It's absolutely not. I think that what I have learned is how to sort of park that side of it and explore, like, really truly, like, invest in different people's methods and understand how I might only take one bit, and it might only be for 1 year or one program or whatever, but truly invest the time learning and mastering the different skills, rather than just saying, like, the example that always comes to my mind is stuff like Eldoa stretching, which is something which I picked up from Altus and I sort of ran with, and I invested heavily in that, did a long course. Talking of being in a room where I didn't understand a word that they were talking about, my God, that was different level stuff.
What course was it, sorry?
It was Eldoa, Eldoa.
Yep.
So it's a French-Canadian guy called Guy Voyer, and it's a particular type. It's a methodology of stretching. It's a bit like a neural stretch. It's postural stuff. It's a bit of everything, and it's really, it's hardcore. Like, it's freaking tough.
Contract and release type stuff, or is it?
It's more like it's more contract, and stretch and pull yourself in the right direction. So it's co-action of spine and trying to release. It's a bit like fascial stretching type stuff. It's a bit of a mixture of everything. We got at Port, we did it religiously for years, and we got into it, and I see some of the boys have just joined on here, so they went through this and they hated it, but some of them still liked it. And, like, to be honest, like, whether it worked or not, I don't care. But what
you explored
at the time, I explored it fully and give it the best chance, rather than, it's a bit like, people doing Bosch stuff now. Like, get fully immersed in it yourself before you start throwing it into programs and just putting it on Instagram stories just to look good. Don't do that. Like, go and fully invest. I think of the stuff I used to do with, like, I did Eric Cressy's programs back in the day, Charlie Weingroff stuff. You know, I spend a lot of time with Kelly Starrett and his methodology. I'm on Ready State every day doing Ready State stuff, just to, for sure it's for myself, but it's actually to see how I can that be used for, let's see, Billy Frampton. You know, could that be used for him? Could that be used for Ollie or anyone? Like, who are just that one thing? Could that actually make a difference? So that's the sort of stuff that I try to do in that.
No, I love that. I actually stole that question from a coach that worked with me at Box Hill, and he asked me that question. I didn't have the same answer, so I'll definitely tag him. I had a similar answer, but not as deep as yours, but I tried to get a similar.
I could probably go all day on it.
But that's I mean, that resonates with me because it's I probably took the decision maybe 3 years ago to commit to coaching as my number one and put the athlete side of things secondary, where 3 years ago I was definitely battling with the two, and like you said, sometimes I'd be an awesome athlete, but I was a shit coach, you know, and it was a constant battle. Where I feel to be the best father as well as the best coach, you have to have that focus of, well, what am I training for? And if you're having the athlete in mind, you're using your body as a laboratory, and you're still getting experience, like you said, to get that connection with the athlete and have that excitement when you're trying new things out with your athletes, you're coming from experience. So, yeah, thanks, mate. That was a great answer. So with the PhD and the thesis, like, you've done a lot of work in development with athletes, and I know there's a lot of guys that sort of follow my page in that space, sort of your 16 to 19-year-old male and females. What are some key points, whether it be at Port Adelaide or just your own personal belief, that you focus on that are really, really important for a developing athlete, from an athletic development point of view in the sport of football?
Look, I think if you want me to say, you got to do your, the AAA stuff as an example from the PhD. So you got to do your your lunges, your squats, your push pull. You can listen. There's plenty of people talk about that side of things. Get your fundamental movements. Whatever you spend the time to understand and really believe what you think is important from a fundamental or from a foundational movement pattern point of view for every player. Like, what do you believe? Because then that's how you're going to coach it. Don't listen to don't just take what I say as gospel. Go and like actually spend the time to do that yourself. The one thing I would absolutely make sure that you do is that you have, so one, by having that in place, you end up with probably a little bit more accountability to your program, but then also just engagement, whether the 16 to 19 year olds are even younger or even older, doesn't matter. Just make sure that they're engaged in the process and that they're part of they understand to varying levels. Like some of them will understand more than others and want to understand more, but just make them engaged in the process, and you show that you're passionate about how this is going to help them. And keystone for me, if you get that right, whether you do 5 single leg RDLs or whether you do it with your hands out in front or hands on your hips, I'm really not that fussed. It's more if you get that engagement right, then all of a sudden warm-ups become better because you've got a connection with them. Then you can demand a little bit more of them. So don't let them away with doing a walking lunge poorly in a warm-up. Don't let them squat. Like, if they're going to squat well in the gym, they have to squat well everywhere. Like, make sure that they're engaged and they're sort of switched on to that stuff at times. They don't have to be all the time, and it doesn't have to be a military run thing. But it's just, if you want to start to see, if you want to chip away at movement patterns and you want to get people towards your ideal, then you have to sort of put that in place and sneak that in different ways so that they do engage.
Yep. And for athletes that it may be really hard or financial, they don't have access to a gym, what would you recommend that they do? Like, is it power bands, mini bands? Is it setting up a dumbbell at home? What would be your sort of key pillars that you'd recommend? Is it just focus on the running side of things and body weight work?
Yeah, look, I think that there's a lot of people exploring how to, and particularly during this last year, around how to do body weight stuff or how to do more stuff at home with little to no weights. Like, there's plenty of people out there, like, I guess from a strength and conditioning point of view, like an advocate of making sure that you've got your eccentric work in, so doing your Nordics, that sort of stuff. But again, probably as long as whatever you're doing, as long as you're walking out and you can, and don't quote me on the numbers exactly, but if you can do a Copenhagen lever for a minute each side or for reps of 20 to 30, if you can do single leg calf raises for 30, 40 plus, if you can hold yourself in a hip abduction position for a long period of time, if you get that right, then we can worry about how much you squat, all that other stuff. That comes later. The amount of people that can't do those things, and it's only whenever things start to fall apart that you find out, oh, well, no wonder he's getting the calf strains or his soleus is sore because his calf capacity is so poor. At least get that stuff knocked in the head and make sure that it's not even an issue. Yep. Then we can worry about the other stuff and how well you hinge and how well you move, and that can come as long as you get the other stuff in place. And that's certainly something that's changed in how I would talk about that stuff over time. Probably the more I get disappointed with programming whenever that stuff doesn't, you grow up in S&C thinking that squatting and RDLs and Olympic lifting is the only thing you need to do to become better as an athlete. And actually, whenever you start working with these players and you work out, oh shit, okay, well maybe they do need to do some of this other stuff just to get themselves into a position where that capacity is adequate to be able to do the training. Like, that's never going to change. In fact, it's just going to get harder and harder. So I think it's not sexy. It's not what the literature's out there. It's not what Vern and all the godfathers of S&C are talking about, but it's just something which has to be done. And if it's not, well, sorry, your program's not good enough, so go back and do it. So yeah.
And so that makes a lot of sense why the engagement and relationship with the athletes is so important to buy into those things. How do you do that? Because straight away, I know when you talk about Copenhagens and Nordics and these type of exercises, especially holding for a good period of time, you need that trust and respect from your athletes to buy into those exercises that, like you said, they're not as sexy. What are some good ways for S&Cs to do that? Maybe they might be starting a new program, so they've got to build that.
And whether that's just appropriate progressions and like if it's working with teams over a long period of time, you start off with introducing it as isometric. So whether it's fun, whether it's in different things that you're trying to play, you're just sneaking it in, and it's age appropriate or development appropriate. And I don't mean that from like an under 16 versus under 18, but like in terms of their maturity. Like, can you actually get 16-year-olds to sit and do isometrics? Probably not, because they're little shitheads most of the time. They aren't going to do that. So can you trick them into doing it in a certain way? And that's going to change with different groups. So I don't want to say that this is how to do it essentially, but I think that by spending the time actually pondering, okay, what's buy-in look like for this group at this time? We can all go out there and we read conscious coaching, for example, or we read, we talk to everyone else that's doing this stuff, and we go, okay, well, maybe I can take something from them. The greatest S&C coaches are the ones that steal the best, rather than the ones that say they've made it up themselves. Are probably telling a few half-truths there. So try and steal from the people that you can.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there's a progression there, just like with your exercise stuff. You see what's in front of you with the group, where they're at, and then over time you're sort of working towards where you want to be with them. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. Ian, we'll wrap it up with 2021, mate. What are you excited about for next year?
I'm hoping that we get some normality back to training environments and things like that, but I'm really interested and very excited about how do we distill the stuff which has been actually really positive about this year, particularly from an AFL restrictions and training restrictions point of view. How do we take the good bits and the bits that we've learned from? Because we've probably had a year of accelerated growth or accelerated exposure to just things which we would never have even been able to consider before. So can we actually take that, and can we be strong enough as a club, as a performance team, as a high performance manager to take those positives and make sure that they work for the long term with us, rather than just be sort of a 2020 and brush it under the...
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's an awesome mindset to have, and alone normality would be a really good thing. So good to hear Adelaide's going well as well.
Yes, we need to. Yep, keep it coming. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Really appreciate it for your time, mate. It's been good chatting.
No, pleasure, and thank you very much for all your help. It's been really, really valuable. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Makkers. We'll speak soon, mate.
Cheers. Thank you.
Catch up. Thanks for